Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hesitation Station. It's me, Tank. Where's the switch? With my buddy Jay. Hey, Jay, how you doing?
Oh,
Do you like my lantern?
I like how you came in. That was nice. Good
Thank
job for your first time introduction.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Why are you excited?
Well, as you will notice, my lovely background and your lovely background, we have a wonderful, wonderful person coming on to our show. I would honestly be okay if he narrated my life, like with Morgan Freeman and Samuel L. Jackson. But anyway,
Morgan Freeman narrated penguins' lives.
Yeah, no, that's it. I need him to narrate my life. I need this man to narrate my life. Narrate. Narrate.
That's a new word.
Yep, narrate. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful guest. He is the keeper of the Black Dragon Tavern. His name is Castle. What's up, buddy?
How's it going?
Good day, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
We greatly appreciate you coming on.
I love the background.
The legendary Hesitation Station should be a stop on everyone's
travels. I've never been called legendary before.
You know what they say?
Feel accomplished.
Legends never die.
Heroes get remembered, but legends
never die. Oh, Sandlot, classic.
So, Castle, how are you doing today? How's everything going in your neck of the woods?
It's going good. I'm currently trying not to cook to death in this heat. I think it's actually 105 outside right now.
I mean, you are in a tavern that's kind of lit by candlelight and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty hot.
Gotta go into the cellar down there.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a question. Is there an actual Black Dragon at your tavern?
So there are technically two.
Oh Lord!
But the Black Dragon Tavern name actually comes from an old bit of family folklore.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather's family. My grandfather is a very big family. Him and my grandmother had 16 children together. And from him and my grandmother, there are about 350 people who are all a part of my grandfather's immediate family.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that my grandfather's family is sort of unique is my grandfather traces his and several other of his relatives' lines back to the folk who wrote the Brown Laws and the Sean Key of Ireland, and going even as far back as the Druids and the Sons of Mill, which I don't know how much you know about Irish history and folklore, but the Sons of Mill were Celts essentially from the Spanish area, what we would call Spain today, who were one of the invading groups that came into Ireland from the Book of Invasions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that my grandfather records is that in all of the lines that he has as his direct family, what he calls the Great Clans of Ireland, they have an ancestor who was cursed or who was transformed into a beast at some point. And in my family's line, my father's line, there was one of our ancestors was transformed into a dragon, a sea dragon, for his sloth. And that sea dragon was black and green. And it, whenever it would yawn, it would put to sleep all of the inhabitants of the coastal towns where it dwelled.
Yeah.
So the Black Dragon is a reference to that ancestor who was transformed into a black sea dragon.
That is interesting.
I know absolutely nothing about my history. Now I need to do some research.
One of the most common messages I get, one of the most common comments I get is people saying, "Hey, do you know anything about this family?" And I probably send 300 or 400 messages and emails a month to people just answering their questions about their heritage, their family line, where their families were from. Honestly, it could be a full-time job if I charged for it, but I don't.
I've always wanted to know where my family's from, because when I was growing up, my mom, I was like, "Mom, where are we from?" And she'd be like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, what are we?" She's like, "You're American." And I'm like, well, "No crap. Where did we come from?" Like,
It's like, duh.
hello. But I don't really have much, and I really didn't want to pay, $70 for a DNA test thing that they send you through the mail.
Well, and here's the crazy thing: is that those DNA tests are not accurate anyway.
Yeah, I'm glad I never did. So,
Because what they'll do is they can anybody in your life who's had a DNA test or who's had their DNA put into the registry, they'll be able to trace that. So you'll be able to find relatives going back about 60 years. Yeah. After that, they rely on record keeping.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, it's very hard for people to trace an Irish lineage because I can never remember what the years are. You're going to find this. I'm terrible with remembering years. I have millions of stories in my head. I couldn't tell you if they happened in 2022 or in 1002. But essentially, one of the big record halls in Northern Ireland burned down in the early 1900s, I believe. And it contained the birth, death, and marriage records of essentially 90% of the populace of Ireland.
Oh, wow.
So getting any sort of familial records going back more than like 100, 120 years, if you're Irish, is incredibly difficult to do because most of the records just don't exist anymore.
Well, that's great because I'm Irish and Native American on my dad's side.
I'm
so two notoriously poor kept records.
Love it.
Love it. I think I'm British because my last name, which I don't care. Oh my gosh, he's saying his last name on the internet. My last name is Whittington, and when I looked at that, there's a lot of Whittingtons in the British. So I don't know where I'm originally from, but I did find at one point on the internet that you can ask Tank over here, yeah, that I lose stuff often. Whichever side, and I lose stuff often. And when I looked it up online, now of course this is not reliable. This was on the internet, so I highly doubt it. They were saying that the Whittingtons were a knight and that they guarded the Holy Grail. And I'm like, well, no wonder it's lost. So I don't know.
How do you spell your last name? What is the spelling of it?
Whittington.
Okay. So generally, when you're looking at names like Ton, having that as the ending of a name does usually signify some sort of title holding or nobility, because it usually is referring to a section of land.
Okay.
So if your last name has like Shire in it, like Witshire or anything like that, it generally means that your family had some sort of control of a tract of land at some point. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are directly related to nobility. There are plenty of families that had what are called branch families, and those branch families had next to no power or influence or anything of the like. But generally speaking, and this is something that I've gotten into fights with people on the internet for, is if you are alive today and you have European, or really, if you're alive today and you have any descent, chances are you are at least tenuously related to some form of nobility. Why? Because most peasants, most poors, didn't have the resources to really pass on large families. It is very rare that you will see somebody who comes from generational poverty historically. That's why family trees are usually so narrow, because when you think about it, what is it? We have 12,000 years of recorded human history and 100,000 years of implied human history. And for some reason, our family trees are not millions of miles wide with that number of people. It's because there's a lot of intermarrying that goes on.
Yeah.
This dude's like a walking encyclopedia.
Oh, dude, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love his videos.
So, Castle, tell us about you. I mean, we kind of got off on a ADHD rant here about us, but let's hear about
it's
you.
NASCAR. We're taking a left turn.
Well, I was born in the United States, and I went to live with my grandfather in Southern Ireland when I was 6 months old. And my grandfather raised me until I was in my teens. And then I graduated to get ready to go to university at around 14. I came to the US to do that. And my life got very interesting at around 15, 16 years old. And I won't go too deep into this unless it's something you guys want to hear. But I had a falling out with my grandfather pretty much immediately after I moved back to the US. My family in Ireland has a very strict upbringing. My grandfather is very old-fashioned, very traditional. We go through, you're not considered, you could be 80 years old, and if you've not gone through adulthood trials, you're not treated as an adult in my grandfather's family. Yeah. So if you gentlemen were to come to dinner at my grandfather's house, you would sit at the kids' table because you'd not be considered adults.
Wow.
In a tenuous sense. I'm kidding. Yeah. Obviously, if you were a guest, you'd sit with everybody else. Yeah, so my upbringing with my grandfather is very strict. And my parents here who were living still in the US, and they were also strict, but also they hated each other.
Yeah.
So during that tenuous part of my life, I ended up falling in with bad people. And up until I was about 22 years old, I worked for less than legitimate folk in out here in the United States. We'll keep it at that unless you'd like to hear more. And more or less, I sort of wandered aimlessly. I worked in marketing and sales for a while. My brother and I used to run a company that did work for like San Diego Comic-Con, Stan Lee, a bunch of my company was the media team that covered Stan Lee's last birthday before he died.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
So I've done lots of things. But then when the pandemic hit, all of my business was in events. So clearly there were no events going on for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And I had been doing stories on social media as just like a hobby, a way of like relieving stress, just of having fun. And also doing dark humor and fighting with people just for the fun of it on an old brand that I don't use anymore. And at first I did it just because it was fun. I love going back and forth with people, and I love a good scrap. So I would just do it. And then when I got to a realization that nobody was having any conversations to come to an end, nobody wanted to reach a conclusion or an understanding, but everybody was fighting because they wanted to be right, no matter how correct they were. And that got to be tiresome, and I hated the drama side of it. So I had started telling some more traditional stories. And keep in mind, I denounced my citizenship when I was 19. I had my first falling out with my grandfather when I was 16, and then the big one was at 19, and that's why I denounced my citizenship. And I had no intention of ever going back to tradition or anything of the like. Because we're basically raised to be storytellers. The underlying law of our family is remember without fail.
Yeah.
My grandfather raises storytellers and story keepers. It's our tradition to keep stories and pass them on faithfully without imposing ourselves on them. And then I started telling some of the traditional stories that I grew up with. And for some reason, it resonated with people. Like, I had been doing jokes like one of the running jokes I had on my old social media was that I was a cannibal, and that everybody else in my neighborhood was weird because they were tired of all the bodies in my backyard. Like, it was just a running series of dark humor jokes that got out of hand. But then I started telling fairy stories and talking about history, and it resonated with people. People really loved it, and I realized how much I missed growing up and how much I'd let my disagreements with my grandfather shape the way I looked at my heritage, my culture. And so I started doing more. I went through a very rough 2018 to 2022. My parents both passed away 6 months apart in 2018. And it put me deep into a hole, both financially and otherwise. And they left behind a bunch of debt. And then I lost my company in 2021, which then put me further in debt, about $180,000. And then in 2020, I had a long-term relationship that ended. And I met my current wife. A few years before that, we had worked together. And she helped me with a place to live while I was more or less in poverty in 2021. And we've been together ever since then. But she deeply fell in love with my family's culture and tradition.
Yeah.
And really, us finding the tavern again, us becoming her keepers, was really because of my wife, not because of me. Because she has constantly pushed and encouraged me to keep storytelling and to keep the tavern open and to let folk come in and enjoy it. Because to me, it's always just sort of been a thing, but to her, she's like, this is who we are. This is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So there, I think I've talked for a solid 7 minutes.
You good, dude.
That is a beautiful. I mean, you don't often get stories like that where you go through your trials and tribulations, and then you end up meeting, whether you know it or not, your future spouse, partner, and they help you through the struggles, they help you through everything, and then you come out on the better side, and it's like, oh wow, everything's kind of fallen into place, and now I have this wonderful person beside me to help me go through this, and we can grow together. And tell your wife I said thank you, because I love your stories.
I will let her know.
I mean, it goes back, now I don't know as much as you do when it comes to like, stuff like this. Cause y'all two, Tank's a Viking. You're definitely a fucking Viking. And I'm just a dude, but I know for a fact that in
Playing
taverns,
a dude disguised
as another dude. I know that back in the day they would go into taverns and talk and do stories, and it captivated him. So I think that's why it's captivating people when you get on YouTube or Facebook or any of the other platforms, and they sit there and they're like, this is a story that I can, drink, or I can just chill. I don't have to drink or nothing. You just chill and just listen. I feel like I'm part of a family. That's kind of what you have. That's why you keep the tavern open. That's why your wife probably was like, hey, let's do this.
Well, it scratches an itch that a lot of people don't know that they have. Because when I first ran across his videos, I doom scroll, YouTube at 1, 2 in the morning, because you're drunk or you're tired or whatever, you can't go to sleep, so you're just scrolling and scrolling, and then you come across someone that looks as awesome as he does, with a voice like Morgan Freeman, and it's like you hear lore, mythology, stuff from history. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, well, this is something that I've never heard before. It's something, it breaks away from the monotony of it all. Because you can go on YouTube, you can watch TV, and you'll find all kinds of stories or videos about somebody doing somebody dirty or somebody learning something new and then they quit because they got bored. But then you find a storyteller like Castle worth your time that grabs your attention from the start. And it's just, you sit there. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and watched your videos on my phone and then looked at the clock and it's been like 3.5, 4 hours just because I've been watching your stuff.
Well, that is flattering. I'm glad they capture you so well. And Tank, you and I had talked about this before, that the art of storytelling is very much a dying art. Like there are not folk who take into practice the art of storytelling. Like plenty of people will tell stories, but I tell people I'm a classically trained storyteller because I'm trained in the art of storytelling. Pretty much all of my grandfather's family are, because it's not just you get up and you share a string of facts or a string of pieces of information. There is an emotion behind story, because stories are people.
Yeah.
And in essence, human civilization is where it is and is built the way that it has been built because of our ability to keep and share stories. I mean, even when you think about something as we'll say gray and dull as engineering. I don't think anybody would look at an engineering textbook and go, "That's an enthralling story. Please read it to me out loud before bedtime, Daddy." I think most folk would look at it and go, "That's a whole bunch of nonsense that I really couldn't be knackered to care about."
Yeah.
But the reality is that book is the story of all of the men who came before, who learned what was needed to be learned to build a bridge, to put together an airplane, to put together a house, to build a stone wall. And those stories are what build civilization, or what build everything around us, from our character and who we are to the houses we live in and the cars that we drive. But we don't treat those stories with any sort of sanctity anymore. What Jay had said earlier about people using to gather around fires and tell stories, and there's sort of a primal thing, a visceral aspect to gathering around and listening to a story. That's the truth. Like, the storyteller used to be a very central figure in most cultures, and usually it would be a patriarch of some kind. It would be your mother, it would be your father, it would be a chieftain, it would be a village elder would tell the stories. Every year my grandfather hosts anywhere from 6 to 12 festivals. We have 6 to 12 traditional festivals we celebrate. Speaking of which, one of my favorites just began yesterday. It's called Lunessa. Lunessa is the celebration of the foster mother of the ancestor, or what many folk would know as the god Lu, the god of light from Ireland. He is the god of many skills. He was believed to be skilled at everything. So the quintessential jack of all trades, master of all. And his foster mother tilled the grounds of Ireland, tilled the wild earth of Ireland, so that folk could plant seed and survive. And the labor was so great that when she finished, she laid down and died.
Oh, wow.
And so Lou hosted a festival in her honor, in her memory. So this festival, which for our family lasts a week, it's a games festival. So we do competitions, we do strength, we do poetry, we do song, we do spoken word and storytelling competitions, cooking, all of the things.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a celebration of life and vitality, but it is essentially a vigil. It is more or less her continued wake, celebrating the exceptional potential of mankind.
I don't know about you, but I would go.
Oh yeah, hands down.
Now, Castle, you said there's a storytelling competition. I just so happen to be a storyteller myself. So I want to get your honest opinion and judge what you can. So here we go. One time, there was a guy called the Ugly Barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died.
Like that. Ta-da.
No, on the real though.
Points for dramatic effect.
On the real though, yeah, I would definitely go there because we don't really have, as far as I know,
We have
don't
Celtic
anything
Fest, but
yeah,
that's really it.
yeah, man. I don't think they do storytelling. And that I kind of like going back to what you said. It's a primal thing. Like you feel it in your bones, your soul. Because when again, everybody, I don't think I said this while we were recording, but Tank is the other way. Tank is the fangirl of this situation. But I
Yes.
like Castle, and I've done my research on him, and I've enjoyed your videos, and I've sat down and watched a few of them. They have been good, and the storytellings have been good. You put pictures in there, so that way I'm not just falling asleep.
It's like, ooh, pretty colors.
Ooh, pictures. You put pictures, you put videos, you make it. What's the word? Enthrising? Is that it?
You were enthralled and enraptured
Enthralled,
by
yeah.
his
It
stories.
was fun, and like honestly and truthfully, with the way you tell stories and the way your awesome voice is, I could sit down by a fire and listen to you for hours. I really could.
Well, see, that's the thing going off of what you were talking about earlier with the taverns and the bards and everything. You know, it's the minstrels, it's the bards, you know, the patriarch of the clans telling the stories, and how Castle was talking about with the engineering book to build the bridges, to build the houses. If you sit back and think about it, Castle, along with all the other, like when you find an actual storyteller like Castle, or someone that's been trained to do it and they do it with such passion, it's like a bridge to the past.
Yeah.
You know, everybody forgets what happened in the past. You know, we learn history in school, but all they do is touch up on it. You don't get the nitty gritty. You don't get the depth. You know, you get, all right, guys. In 1852, Joe Blow took over town Wanakanaluka, and
That's wonderful.
that was it.
Great story.
But with Castle and people like them, you get, you know, the details, you get the passion, you know, you can feel it inside you, and you're like, wow, you know, because there's been a few of his videos that I've watched, and I just sat there after it was over there. I'm like, damn, I didn't think, you know, you don't really think about it as much.
It is funny that you bring up the history classes, because a lot of folk will come in and be like, well, if you'd have been teaching my history class, I might have paid attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my stepson, he says the same thing. Like, he'll come out and he's like, I don't want to learn about this. It's boring. My stepson's 16, but still he hates anything to do with reading and history and all of that.
Yeah.
And one of the funny things is that he'll say, oh, I don't want to learn about this. It's boring. And then I'll go into detail on the thing that he's talking about. And he's like, well, that's not what the book said, though. The book's boring. And it's little things. Like one of the longer story times that I've done in the last year on YouTube had to do with the first Thanksgiving, right? And this is a thing that gets highly politicized. It gets highly talked about from two different sides of a spectrum. You get people who are, it was all this friendship between pilgrims and Indians, and they loved each other, and they sang Kumbaya, and they ate turkey together. And then you get people on the other side who's like the nasty, mean Europeans came in and killed everybody with machine guns and then burned their corpses and cackled like lunatics while they did so. And neither one of those things is really true. When you look at what actually happened, it's much more nuanced and human and interesting, because the pilgrims who were coming in, they were not militarized in any way, so they didn't really have a whole lot of military abilities. As a matter of fact, most of them were farmers.
Yeah.
And when they came to this new land, they had not a great concept of how to farm the land. But if you read what some folks say about it, they were these imbeciles who couldn't feed themselves. It's not really true. They were doing fair with farming at the time, but there was new land, new weather. Most of these people they grew up in places like England, where it's rainy and gray, and then they come to the east coast of the United States, and what's all this humidity and heat doing here? Where did this come from? We've never experienced this before. So they had trouble learning how to plant crops. But at the same time, the natives who were nearby were having their own troubles with rival tribes. And that first alliance was a very tense one, because while the pilgrims were doing all right with hunting and farming, they were not doing great. They were just doing all right, and doing all right in the old world is not okay. You either have to be doing exceptional or you're failing.
Yeah.
So all of this is going on, and eventually the pilgrims and the natives of the time, they make a pact. I can't remember his name, but the chieftain of the time, he says, hey, you help me with guns and with bolstering our forces to kill off and defend against this rival tribe that keeps attacking us and stealing our food and stealing our land. And we will help you with hunting wild game and with helping with some of the farming. And so there was that tension. But one of the funny things is that when that first meal happened, they had just had a very successful harvest, and a bunch of the pilgrims were, in their very, very American way, firing their guns up into the air. And this scared the natives, not in the sense that they were frightened and they ran, but in the sense that they were like, oh, we're being attacked, we need to ride out.
Yeah.
So I think it was 50 armed warriors showed up. And they confronted each other, and that first meal was a tense one.
Yeah.
Now, later on, new settlers came and broke the treaty that was made by those initial settlers. But if you listen to the way that story is normally told, you would assume, oh, the pilgrims that were there and the chieftain made an agreement, and then a couple of days later, after the pilgrims got what they wanted, they broke it and killed everybody.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. That treaty, I think, stood for almost 100 years, which, name any group of people in the 14, 15, or 16 or 1700s that went more than 100 years without fighting with each other.
You really
I'd
can't.
be willing to bet you can't do it.
Well, and it's funny that you bring all that up, because as soon, like when you were talking about, they come from England where it's gray and rainy and yada, yada, yada. And then they come over to, America where there's new weathers and seasons. It instantly made me think about the World Cup and how they all came over here, for the World Cup. And then it's, everybody's posting on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. Why is it so hot? Why is it so wet? Oh my God, what is ranch?
Right.
It's beautiful because, we sit here, I go to work, I come home, I do the things I have to do around the house. And for most people, they don't think about what could be happening in England what could be happening overseas in China or wherever. We're so focused on what we're trying to do, just trying to survive. And then you get people coming over, or you go somewhere other than what you're used to, and it's a culture shock.
Mm-hmm.
You find the different foods, the different weather patterns, and if the pilgrims had come over and there had been no Native Americans to put that treaty together, who's to say they would have lasted?
Well, and that's one of the things that I strongly dislike about the way that a lot of modern discourse treats history and myth, is we tend to impose a lot of modern thinking on past lives, and that's not a great idea. Because but you'll get this a lot. You'll get people who will put modern expectations on the past, and then moralize the past in a way that is not unfair in the sense that, oh, well, it's not fair, you shouldn't be picking on past people. But it's very easy to look backwards at a group of people whose lessons you've benefited from and whose work and sacrifices you've benefited from and go, I am smarter and better than they are. Well, yeah, of course you are, because you benefit from everything that they did.
Yeah.
That's the obvious and clear path and progression of humanity, is that eventually you become, hopefully, more intelligent and more capable than previous generations. That's always been the survival tactic of humanity. But to look back and go, oh, I'm so much better than these people who lived in a time that I probably couldn't even exist in for more than a few hours, is ridiculous. And Tank, on your point about the World Cup, it was one of my. I don't watch sports anymore. Ever since the LA Heat and the international soccer associations became acting schools, I kind of got out of it. But it was beautiful to see all of these Europeans so many Europeans would just actively demonize Americans because of what they've heard in media or how they perceive Americans. But I'd say probably 70% of Europeans who travel to the US are blown away by the hospitality culture and how cordial and inviting Americans are, and how good the food is, and how much there is to do here, and how open most folk are. Like if you come, because I live near Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a desolate wasteland of just nothingness. Like you cannot find a personable person within 100 miles of Los Angeles who really wants to have anything to do with you, unless you're giving them money, which, that's true of a lot of places.
Yeah.
If you go anywhere where there's a big tourist culture, obviously they're going to be very happy to see you if you've got green on hand. But especially in the American South, like hospitality is a part of the culture of the American South. And so
we are highly skilled in that, sir. We are from Mississippi.
See, my father was from Kentucky.
Nice.
So he grew up out near Louisville.
Oh, okay. So he's still Southern.
Yeah,
I consider Kentucky Southern.
They have great whiskey.
Is your if I may ask, kind of going back to your family castle, is your grandfather still in Ireland?
He is over 100 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope I don't make it to that.
It's insane. Up until recently, he was very active. He, for the last 80, well, no, not 80, probably the last 70 years, he has worked 6 days a week, 5 hours a day, every single day. He takes breakfast off on Sundays to go to mass and to have breakfast with my grandmother. And then he goes into work in the afternoons. But every other day he goes to work. And I'm not on good terms with most of my family in Ireland because of my falling out with my grandfather was seen as highly disrespectful and dishonorable because of how much my grandfather did for me when I was a boy. So I'm a bit of an outcast with my family. Justifiably so. I can't complain. I knew what I was doing when I did it. and I was a pig-headed, hard-headed young man.
So
And one of the frustrating things about that is, as I've grown older, what I've come to realize more and more is my grandfather was right about pretty much all of the things I fought with him about.
That's the beautiful thing about growing up, and I've told Jay this plenty of times, when we're growing up as kids and going into teenagers and even young adults, we think we know everything. We think we've got the world by the oysters, we can do whatever we want. To hell with whatever everybody else thinks. We know it. But then as you get older, you hit the mid-20s, the early 30s, it's like, maybe my aunts and uncles and my parents and my grandparents knew what they were talking about. Because there's been plenty of times where I've gone and done something, and before it was, I know what I'm doing, but now it's, did I really know what I was doing?
no.
And 9 times out of 10, I stand in the bathroom and stare in the mirror like, you are an idiot.
I can honestly say that pretty much everything that I bickered with my grandfather about has come to pass as me being the one who's incorrect.
Yeah.
But and again, going back to my grandfather, he has worked every day, and he's a wealthy man. And interestingly enough, I didn't realize he was wealthy until I was in my 20s, because he doesn't live like a wealthy man.
Yeah.
And I traveled a lot with him when I was a young man. I lived in 13 different countries before I was 14 years old, traveling with my grandfather. Because he works in like international shipping, and he'd started on the docks out in Belfast. And so when I was young, I bounced around a lot between family. But when I was living with my grandfather, I would travel with him because he traveled a lot for work.
Yeah.
And I lived in Iraq for 2 months when I was very young. I lived in multiple countries in Europe. I went to school in Germany for 6 months when I was, I think I was 11 years old. I lived out in Taiwan with him for a few months. And everywhere I ever stayed with him was a slum. So in my mind, I was like, well, my parents are poor, because my parents still living in the US were very poor. So I was like, oh, well, we're just all poor. And in my mind, that made sense. But then as I got older and I realized how much we traveled and what he was doing and the people he was talking to, I was like, wait a minute.
It's like, hold on now.
Why did I sleep on the floor so much as a kid?
Because you're young and your back could handle it.
Yeah, that was more or less it.
Now we do it. We're like,
Sleep on the floor. I wake up the next morning. Can I move? I don't know. Let's test this.
But my grandfather's family has a very strict rule about earning your own honor. Like,
yeah,
none of his sons bear his last name. As a matter of fact, he arranged marriages for all of his sons so that they would marry women that had the strongest connection to the old bloodlines of Ireland as possible. And all of his sons took their wives' last names so that then they would paternally bear the names of those clans on into the future.
Yeah. Wow.
And
that's actually really cool.
Well, I didn't think they still did that.
Well, most folk don't. When I say our family is old school, I mean very like 1600s old school, and in some cases 1100s old school. I mentioned before we have adulthood trials, and one of the last things we do under adulthood trials is a group of our elders take and drop us off in a wildlife preserve, somewhere where it's legal to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And we're left there alone with a select few items that we choose ourselves. And this is usually done sometime between the age of 11 and 16. And we're dropped off, and we have a certain number of things we have to complete on our own staying in the woods for no longer than 3 days. And if you complete them, having completed everything else that is required of what is expected of adults, and you are then allowed to participate in adult conversations and decisions within the greater clan aspect of everything that we do.
So what is the things you do? I know you just named one. What is the whole thing?
So it starts very young. We start being held to standard when we're 6 years old. And one of the earliest things is that if you're going to consume a thing, you have to understand how that thing is made. So, for instance, when it comes to food, starting at 6 years old, if I want to eat a food, I need to have learned how to cultivate and prepare it myself. And keep in mind, we start helping as soon as we're able to walk when it comes to things like this. So, as soon as I was like 2, 3, 4 years old, I was with my aunts and my grandmother out in the garden, helping to collect eggs, helping to grow and pick berries and pick fruit and pick vegetables and trim herbs and things like that. So it's not like we turn 6 years old and suddenly we have to rush outside on a quest like Ash running out with his Pikachu to, so that we're able to eat. But where it becomes more difficult is understanding the cost of food, right? And someplace that a lot of people end up failing and stumbling, especially because even if you marry into the clan, you have to be an adult to marry into my family, which means that people who marry in have to undergo adulthood trials. Because as an adult, I can't marry a child. Like my wife is currently going through adulthood trials with my aunt so that she and I can get married. We are together in the sense that we're engaged, but we have not legally married yet because she is not an adult. Because again, as an adult, you can't marry a child, even if that child is, 30, 40 years old. So if you want to say, have some chicken nuggets, you need to have learned how to raise a chicken, how to kill a chicken, and then how to properly, respectfully butcher and prepare and preserve the meat of a chicken. And this goes along with, even with waste materials. So during festivals, we'll usually have because my grandfather hosts huge festivals. Now, and they're open to pretty much anybody, but primarily they're just family affairs. But like I said, we have 300 immediate family members, and then a bunch of my grandfather's associates tend to participate as well. But they'll slaughter whole pigs and whole cows, and the preparation for big festivals is days in the making. And all of my aunts and all of my uncles and all of my cousins get together, they butcher and prepare the meat, and then all of the blood and the bones from all of the animals that are killed for the feasts are then taken and burned into ash and either scattered over ancestral fields or scattered over gardens, so that you are returning part of what you have taken back to the earth.
Yeah.
So that's all a part of it. Before I was able to have beef again as a young man, I had to participate in raising a cow, killing a cow, butchering a cow, preparing the meat and all of the various pieces of it. And so we learn these things very young, and then we start participating in them around 6 years old. And then the same thing goes for, we learn how to make our own clothes. We learn how to maintain a home. We learn about financial responsibility. We learn about pretty much every basic skill you can think of. We are required to go through and learn, at least tenuously. It's not about being a master. It's about having an understanding of what the cost is. So our childhoods were very busy. There was no point where, as a child, I remember not being my stepson. He loves to say, "I just want to relax." Right? He's very much a modern child. But I cannot remember a time in my entire childhood when I had time to relax. I was always doing something, and I would get sent to be with my uncle who was a blacksmith, my uncle who was a silversmith, my aunt who was a seamstress, my grandmother would teach me to knit and crochet and to embroider. I have an uncle who is a brewer, and I have an uncle who is a distiller, and I learned how to do those things. I went and stayed with a friend of my grandfather's who was a baker, and I learned about baking bread in a multitude of different ways when I was, I think, 8 years old. But then we also participated in those things within the household.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a long list of skills that you have to participate in and understand before you can become an adult.
Yeah, that's cool to me.
Full disclosure, Jay, I love you, but I want to replace you with him so I can learn all kinds of shit.
Oh,
Like this, I'm gonna be honest, man.
all right.
If,
All right, guys. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye. wait, let me see if it. Oh, fuck.
Nope, you failed. Hey, there we go. But no, I mean, like I understand that that's y'all's traditions, but I'm gonna be honest, man. I've looked out at the world, and if we had that everywhere, I think the world would be a better place.
Well, cost is often hidden.
Yeah,
and it's become a major part of modern culture. One of the big issues is the hiding of death. So, like, how many people have ever seen a cow die? Probably less than 5% of let's say of the American populace. We'll just use America. Probably less than 5% of Americans have ever seen a cow die.
Yeah.
And I would say less than 1% have ever been there and participated in the action of slaughtering a cow. But how many people in the United States have had a cheeseburger?
everybody.
Probably most of them, right? And it's the same thing with how we die. When we die, if it happens in a hospital, somebody comes in, they cover up the body with a sheet, and then they take and they put them away in a box, and then they put them into another box, and then they put them into another box, and then that box either goes into the ground or gets burned, and we never really have to look at or face what death is.
Yeah.
But death is the goal of all life. The goal of all life is to eventually die. And that's not a sad thing. That is a part of what sustains us. That is a part of the cycle of existing. And it's not, it is a sad thing when it's tragic, but it is also one of the great privileges is to live long enough to die. And we hide that. We hide that and we're afraid of it. And it's this distant thing that could happen to anyone else, but it could never happen to me. And my burger, my cow just magically transformed into a cheeseburger. It didn't die. It just magically transformed in some wizard's lab somewhere, and that's what happened.
Yeah. Animorphs.
Right.
It's funny that you said that, because that is an exact quote. The whole goal of all life is death. That's a quote from one of my favorite animes. It's called Overlord.
I love Overlord. That's not where it came from, but I love Overlord.
Well, it's funny that you said that because I have the voice actor for Ainsul Gown. I have his autograph, and that's the quote that he wrote on there. The goal of all life is death.
So that saying is one that my grandfather's family has had for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Is that the goal or the eventuality of all life is death. And when I saw that it was in the anime, because Overlord is exceptional. I know a lot of people don't like it because some parts of it are edgier.
Yeah.
But the storytelling is exceptional. I'm actually reading through the light novels. My wife got them for me for Christmas last year.
Nice.
And I'm reading through the light novels. They contextualize much of the anime that is confusing. So if you've never read the light novels, I would say pick them up. They're worth the read. They add a lot of really wonderful context to it. But yeah, when because it's a spell, I think, that Ainsul Gown casts. in one of his fights. But I was tickled because I was like, oh my god, that's something my grandfather says.
That's amazing.
And it's again, it's one of those things that most people don't want to hear. They don't want to hear that, oh, we're destined to die.
Yeah.
But it is one of the beautiful aspects of what we are, is that you have people in your mind right now who are surviving and immortal in a sense because you remember them. They're not here anymore. Their physical body has disappeared. It has become a part of the aether again. But them as a person, that iteration of a living being, lives through you now because you carry their story. And that is one of the most beautiful things about human nature and the way that we exist, is that immortality is not something we can ever achieve physically, but it's something that every one of us can achieve by living a good life.
Agreed.
We should have gotten you on here sooner.
So I want to.
This is great.
So here's the thing. I want to tell you that there is. Okay. You know what? I wasn't gonna say this, but now I'm gonna embarrass your ass. All right. So Tank loves to. I say jokingly, but he doesn't joke. We always talk about death. We have talked about this numerous times, going to different cons and stuff like that. And I'll joke with him, be like, "Oh, you're gonna die." He's like, "Yes," stuff like that. That's what he does all the time. But this dude, he almost did die.
I hate candy.
And
hate it with a passion. Sour Patch straws. They're on my hit list.
He almost choked on them.
Yeah, dude, it was the wild. So I make jokes all the time about dying, because I look out at society and I see the way the world's going. And truth be told, man, if it don't get better, I don't know if I want to be here. But they're jokes. Well, it's been about a month ago now, maybe. So I was in the military, and the military did a thing where you can get your medical card. So I have one. And, it helps with the constant pain, migraines, sleeping, all that jazz. Well, somebody's wife gave me some candy, and I don't know if it was expired or what, or I don't know. Okay, so apparently it was expired. So we were playing a video game on computer, and I was like, I'm hungry. So I opened the pack. I ate one, was fine, and then I went and ate another one. And I don't know if I'm just stupid or what, but it was extra chewy. Like for some reason, it was like I was eating rubber. And I went to swallow it, and it just stayed in my throat. Like I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk, I couldn't do nothing. Well, I had my headset on, and I was coughing, and they were hearing me, and they're like, "Oh, he's just coughing." Well, I got up and I went to the bathroom. My face was bright red. I couldn't breathe. I ended up doing the Heimlich on myself. And at some point, his wife was like, "Oh, I think he's actually choking. You might want to go check on him." So my wife comes from the other side of the room, the other side of the house, comes to this spare bathroom and sees me. And when she does, I did the Heimlich. It shot out of my mouth, and everything that I ate came up with it. Spicy food going down is spicy food coming back up. But I say all that to say this. I still make the jokes every once in a while. I'm never going to stop.
Every once in a while. Okay.
Shut up. But for like the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks after that, I was a mess. Because, I've made jokes like that for years. I've dealt with death. Multiple family members pass away, friends pass away. I've had coworkers pass away. But then, and it's like you said, we hide it. It's never, oh, that's somebody else. It's never me. Well, it almost happened to me, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm 6'4", 315 pounds. I'm a large man, but I cried like a baby because I instantly thought, well, what's going to happen with my wife? What's going to happen with my best friend and his wife? What's going to happen with my family? I'm not going to be there to shoulder things like I usually do. They're going to have to figure out how to do it on their own. Well, thankfully, it didn't happen, obviously, because I'm still here. But yeah, dude, it put a lot of stuff in perspective for me. I'm just like, yeah.
So I want to talk about two things that you said. The first one is the state of the world, and not being sure if you want to be here. I hear that a lot, and one of the things I like to say when I do hear people say it is the only way that things ever get better is if good people make them better. Now, I have a tenuous idea of what good means, because I don't think there is such thing as a good person. Good is not something that is inherent to human beings. We're born kicking and screaming and selfish little bastards, one and all. As a child, you want to monopolize your parents. You want all of their resources, everything that you can. Generosity, kindness, and not kindness in the sense that you're kind for sake of kindness, but kindness in the sense that you understand what it means to be good to someone else.
Yeah.
Because, like, for instance, if you have a friend who is morbidly obese and they go out and they eat terrible food and they sit around all the time and don't do anything to help themselves, and you go, no, you just keep living your life how you want to live. That's not kind. That's not loving. That's not a nice thing to do for somebody. If somebody is struggling and they're making themselves unhealthy through their lifestyle, if you love them, the caring thing to do is to try and help them get away from that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing like if you have a friend who is addicted to drugs, or a friend who is a gross alcoholic who is constantly ruining things in their own life because of it. Now, again, so some people drink for fun. I haven't had a drink in ages because and this is going to be the other thing that we'll talk about. I have medical issues that make it better that I don't take substances.
Yeah.
But the only way that things can improve is if people take up the mantle of improving them. There's an old parable about two villages who live on either side of a river. And every year they build a rope bridge across the river so that they can exchange goods. And every year the bridge gets wiped out by the flooding, and then every year they build it again. Well, one year a builder comes and builds a very good bridge. And the people of the village are very happy that this bridge is there. Now, there are a couple of people in the village who complain that, the bridge builders, the ones who build the rope bridges, will no longer have the work to build the bridges every year. But for the most part, everybody's happy about it.
Yeah.
But then the bridge builder leaves. And over the years, the bridge slowly decays. And no one ever takes up maintaining or repairing the bridge.
Yeah.
And over time, the bridge becomes unsafe. And the villagers on both sides start to curse the bridge builder for not have building it better, for leaving, for not coming back to take care of the bridge. But not a single person ever thought to maintain the gift that they've been given.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how most of the world functions. Most of us, and this is in our nature. We're a lazy species. We take the path of least resistance wherever we can find it. That's because our brains are simultaneously smart and stupid. To say it's the reason why sugar is so addicting, and it's because for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, sugar was very hard to get. sugar was a very, very valuable internal resource.
Yeah.
So when our brain could get some sugar, that's why your body can turn starch into sugar, because your body needs sugar. But now sugar is in 90% of the things we eat. And it's not difficult to get anymore, but our brain is still stupid. It has only had 60 odd years to adjust. We've only had 2 generations of being overloaded with sugar for people to understand, for the brain to start learning that, hey, this isn't a hard thing to get anymore. Stop craving it. But in general, we tend to push all of that to the side, and we take the path of least resistance. And that's why things get to be so bad.
Yeah.
Up until for a very long time, Americans made some of the most exceptional electronics, hardware, and machines in the world. Like, I would say between the 1920s and the 1950s, pretty much anything made in America was exceptional.
Yeah.
And then stuff started to go down a little bit. And then in the 1950s and 60s, we started getting in Chinese and Taiwanese and Japanese materials. And those became less and less durable, less and less well made. And you had American companies that then started competing on 2 different fronts. You had some that started making things better because of wanting to make something that was of a higher standard. But then you also had the evolution of planned obsolescence, which is now the standard around the world. And now we have nothing that lasts.
Yeah.
So the only way that things improve is if we take the time to improve them. And obviously, you gentlemen seem very proactive in your life. So obviously, I'm not pointing fingers at you. But in general, you can't control anybody else. I can't control what you do. You can't control what I do. You can't control what happens to you. All you can do is do the best with the hand that you're given and not have expectations outside of that.
Yeah.
Because to add on to that, the gap between a satisfied, happy life and a miserable life is expectations. And like, why is it that crackhead out on the corner is so happy, but you who live in a house and have a lot of the things that you love are miserable? Well, it's because he has everything that he wants and he's content with it.
Facts.
He doesn't have it. Somehow he manages to get the thing that he wants all the time, in spite of the fact that he lives on a tent and screams at demons. And
he's howling at the moon and scratching his arms like a giant ape, but he is happy.
He's good. Yeah. He's Gucci.
and I think that's one of the things. A lot of people, and I'm guilty of this at times too. It's the instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
You want something, or you want to do something, and it's like 9 times out of 10, what you want to get the outcome that would benefit you the most and leave you with a long-lasting, like a good impression. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes work. And a lot of people these days don't want that. They want what they want and they want it now.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to put forth the effort, put forth the time. And I think that deals with a lot of like the depressive episodes, anxiety, and stuff like that. Because, we'll see, going back to the crackhead, we'll see other people and it's like, they're doing great. Why can't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
But if you sit back and look at everything, I was talking to my mom the other day, and it's, there are times where I'm not happy, and it's because of this, that, or the other. And I know it's all in my mind, but if I sit back and look at everything that I've got a job, I've got a roof over my head, my wife's happy, we've got food, we've got clothes on our backs. I mean, yeah, things could always be better, but that's the state of the world. That's how things are. But as it sits right now, if I step out and look at everything that I've got, look how everything's fallen into place, it's not perfect, but it's mine.
Right. Well, and things could always be better.
Yeah.
But one thing I like to remind, because I have a lot of young folk in my community, one thing I like to remind them all is that while things could always be better,
They can always be worse.
Well, and historically, things have never been better.
Fair.
If you are a human being who has lived in the last 80 years, especially in the United States or really anywhere in like the upper parts of Western Europe,
Yeah.
there's never been a better time or place to be alive.
Yeah.
I get people all the time who say, well, wouldn't you want to go back to medieval times? I was like, I would not want to go back to any time that does not have a goddamn air conditioner.
See, when people ask me that if I want to go back to medieval times, I say yes, because the mead that they have at those restaurants and watching the jousting fights and everything is amazing. And by medieval times, I'm talking about the ones in like Orlando and California and all that.
I would say no, simply for the fact that when I was younger, I thought, I was going to be like this knight or holy knight or something of that nature, or, I'm the best there is. In reality, if I was to get sent back to medieval times, I'd probably be a peasant. I'd probably be something struggling worse than I am today. I mean, I'm not saying my life is bad, but kind of what Tank said. I got a house, a wife, all that good jazz. But I'd probably be way worse than medieval times.
Well, and most folk would be. Like,
Yeah.
you have to remember that. Take the Vikings, who are widely considered to be one of the most successful colonizing and settling groups in all of human history. Most Vikings were farmers or builders of some kind. Like most of them, their specialty was in building or farming or in animal husbandry or something. And raiding was just sort of like the lucrative side gig, the multi-level marketing of the
It's
9th
a pyramid
century.
Raiding was DoorDash.
It's like, look, Ragnar, if we get everybody else, we can take 13 people and go raid this one temple and come back with money for everyone.
Well, it's funny because historically, this is something that we've seen happen often. So a lot of people don't realize that the Celts as a whole were not one nation. The Celts were probably about 300 different tribes, and they were called the Celts because the Romans. And then there's debate over this, and people will argue one way or the other. But one of the broadly believed definitions is Keltoi, which is foreigner or barbarian. It's similar. It means basically somebody else. It means not us.
Yeah.
And putting it very loosely, that's not a literal translation, but it's generally what the term would mean. And when you go into looking at the history, yes, sometimes the tribes would get together and conglomerate, but generally they were very separate.
Yeah.
But when the Gauls, or what we know as the Gauls, or the various tribes that were in that area, decided that they wanted something, they would go after it. And there's a Celt named, and these were the Senonese Celts. There was a Celt named Brennus, who almost conquered Rome. And if he had wanted to conquer Rome, he would have. Because he marched right into Rome, sent everybody running from the city, with only a few thousand people held up in the fortress, in the central part of the city. And him and his men controlled the city for weeks, and the people who were held up in the central city were starving to death. And if he'd wanted to, he had the power, he had the influence, he had the position. He could have just let them starve, and then the Celts would have ruled Rome before Rome even became Rome. But what he did instead, he didn't care. He didn't want the land. He didn't want their holy city. He didn't want any of that. What he wanted was gold. So he demanded that he have, I don't remember how much gold it was, but I think it was something like his full body weight or something like that.
Yeah.
And when they came back and they negotiated with him, he used a loaded scale and then used his sword as the measure weight for poundage. And the Romans at the time, they whined and they complained. They're like, it's not fair, the scale's loaded. And there's this famous folklore around Brennus that says, as the Romans protested that the weight wasn't fair, because he ends up leaving with like 1,500 pounds of gold. We're talking enough gold that it put Rome into debt for almost 100 years afterwards.
So he demanded a ransom of 1,000 pounds of gold and tossed his heavy sword onto the scales, declaring "Vae Victus," which is "Woe to the conquered."
Vae Victus. He laughs at them and says, "Vae Victus, woe to the conquered," which this man essentially says, "Oh, you're sad that I'm taking all of your gold? Don't lose next time."
That's great.
Well, Castle, real quick, if you
Yes.
can do me a favor.
Certainly.
Can you, if you don't mind, you can say no, it's fine. Would you mind if you give us a little shout out saying to come and visit us and make sure you catch you on here?
All right. Come and find me, Castle, the keeper of the Black Dragon Tavern, at the Hesitation Station with Tank and Jay, talking about all things stories. And you can find me in the tavern, anywhere the tavern can be found. Black Dragon Tavern.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Tank and Jay with Hesitation Station, here with Castle, keeper of the Black Dragon Tavern. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the places with the people, even though we don't really like people because we're like that. Castle here is a beautiful soul. Go follow him as well. Find the Black Dragon Tavern everywhere you can find the tavern. That's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and God knows where else because Vikings get around. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day.
Wonderful.